Okay, welcome everybody to Frisella All Around the Yard. Today I have Jean Ponzi, the Green Resource Manager at the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and she is the Earth Waste Center Green Resources Manager. Did I say that correctly, Jean?
You did.
Okay, good. So, Jean, I know you've been involved in this for quite a long time. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved with being the Green Resource Manager at the Earth Waste Center.
Well, in the bigger picture, I totally discovered and engaged in environmental everything at the Missouri Botanical Garden. First, as a member who would come every day and like waltz around and hug the trees when I was in my 20s. and that was like really a long time ago. And then in 2 stints of staff membering, ecology was something that kind of dropped in my lap. And I love the garden and I love the world of plants, even though I'm not a plants woman. They don't let me near the petunias. That would be bad. And environmental subject matter, environmental work came my way. And I like to say I was smart enough to recognize it and
You were.
join on.
Nice. It really is really cool.
It's really good that I get to do this with the plant world too, because plants and bugs, I can follow all through their lives, but bigger than bugs, anything living grosses me out when it dies. So I got
what you mean.
Entomological and botanical.
Exactly. Yeah. On the drive out to Defiance, we see a lot of things that have a short lifespan, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the chain of the circle of life on how that happens quite often. Yeah. So
goodness for composting.
Exactly. So today I know you and I wanted to talk about pollinators, and pollinators for us here at the nursery is not a new subject, but an ever increasing subject. People are more and more interested in pollinators, more and more interested in natives. And so, we have a section, which is really neat. We did it last year, of just pollinators and Missouri natives, which is really a fun way for people to start their gardens. But so just for everybody listening today, technically, what is a pollinator?
Well, a pollinator is generally a flying, in the animal kingdom, a flying being. It can be an insect, a bird, a bat, insects. It can be butterflies, moths, beetles, flies pollinate some kinds of plants.
Awesome.
Plants, as we know, don't move. Plants are rooted.
Correct.
And their kin in the animal kingdom fly, swim, crawl, walk, all of that movement. So plants rely on their relations in their sister kingdom, mixing my metaphors there, to pollen from one plant to the other to facilitate reproduction, so that one individual plant, the pollen moves from the male parts of one plant to the female parts of another plant. And that reciprocity between plants and animals is what keeps plants growing. That is the complement, if you will, the partnership of the reciprocity between plants and animals that keeps everybody breathing and living. We need oxygen, they need carbon dioxide. We waste carbon dioxide, they waste oxygen. So that exchange in the natural world, that is a rule of life in the natural world that functions with zero waste, real zero, not just near zero. And that elegance of how everything works in relationship and in reciprocity in nature, that's one of the things I love about working with ecological and environmental subject matter and communicating that to my fellow Homo sapiens.
How did we get to this point where now, like I'd say in the last 5-10 years, we're really caring about pollinating? I mean, the EPA was established 50 years ago. How did we get away from protecting the environment to not protecting the environment to now it seems almost emergency-like?
Yeah. Well, ecology is a very new body of scientific understanding. There were ecological first adopters, identifiers back in the 1800s. Frederick, I can't think of his last name. He was a count and he was an, explorer, and he was a deputy. But ecology as a real science, moving out of being sort of the squishy science, is like less than my lifetime. And it's all about relationships in place, and understanding the impact that living beings and living systems have on each other, and the way in which everything in the biological world, the natural world, interacts. So yeah, we had the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act and the EPA, and all that was all enacted in also in my lifetime.
Exactly, mine too. Yeah,
but we weren't understanding yet the consequences of, say, moving one species of honeysuckle around the world from its native place in Asia into Europe and North America, where it has no natural competitors, like bush honeysuckle, the kudzu of Missouri. So we really didn't, I don't know, when somebody came to understand the nature of pollinators. Dr. Peter Avon, President Emeritus of the Missouri Botanical Garden, was he was an originator of understanding of coevolution, of how different species between the kingdoms rely on each other and evolve together. And this is really, really recent. And then if you fast forward to like right now, and the pollinator gardening movement that we have in St. Louis and other places, it's off the charts in popularity. It's so great. Happily, human beings get excited by things like bugs. Sometimes it's like, and other times, like with monarch butterflies, the poster bug for human impact and human potential for restoration and protection. Helping we as plantsmen and women and ecological advocates and, rainscaping gardeners, stormwater managers, landscape designers, we have helped people reconnect to some of those relationships and our potential for good as well as harm in those relationships. And, when did that start? Gosh, Grow Native, our native plant program that originated in Missouri, funded by the Missouri Department of Conservation. I believe that was launched in like 1992, maybe 1995. So, very recent, having a focus of funding and professional energy and public engagement and professional engagement with the green industry to understand and source native plants, use them in designs. All that is very, very recent, but those forces have continued to coalesce in popularity in our region. So somebody like Doug Tallamy now, author of Bring Conservation Home, Nature's Best Hope and the Nature of Oaks, one of the best writers and speakers about all this stuff. He has said over and over again in public, St. Louis is the national leader in doing this work with native plants. We are at the forefront of everyone because I
think it's our great relationship we have with the Missouri Botanical Garden, the best resource that we have. And I encourage my customers, my guests, to go to the Mobot website, learn about the plants, learn about what is going to be, how it's going to grow in our area here in Missouri.
Yeah. Well, and encourage them to actually come to our place and send them out for native plants, send them to Shaw Nature Reserve, where the Whitmire Wildflower Garden, which was a 70th birthday gift from industrialist Anton Whitmire to his wife, Peg. What a gift.
Amazing gift.
2 top native plant gardens in the country and a leading one in the world, up there in the U.S. with the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center outside of Austin.
I know, and I visited that in Austin last year.
Me too.
Wasn't that the best?
Fun.
How much Lady Bird did for this movement back in the 60s is unbelievable, that no one realizes the impact that First Lady had on this nation.
Right. My grandma would make fun of her. She would say, Lady Bird Johnson says, plant a tree, a bush, or a shrub.
Plant it. Just plant it.
But of course, she was advocating for native plants. She was advocating for the plants that are the ones that are of that place, whatever that place is.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the hill country of Texas. It could be right here with our Jean Baptiste false indigo that is, very, very much a native here. One of my very favorites.
Well, and one of the very cool things about that is that bioregionalism, that, the populations of natives and the cultures of natives
Mhm.
is what makes life interesting. When you go from place to place, when all you could get was a McDonald's burger, which you could at one point, whoopee, we can get them
Yes.
all over the world.
Yeah.
When you get cuisines, when you hear people's accents and their idioms and their speech,
Mhm.
you see different kinds of dress and you meet different plants and
Yeah.
animals.
It's
That's
amazing.
very exciting.
It's very, very thrilling. Okay, so just somebody like me, how can I know I need to care about pollinators because that's how, we're going to have some oxygen. We're going to give off the carbon dioxide that my plants need. They're going to give off the oxygen that I need. That's why we definitely need to care about pollinators and pollinating plants. But how can somebody like me help protect pollinators?
Well, number one is, what you brought up at the very beginning of this conversation. What are pollinators and, why are they important? Why should we care? Another big reason why we should care is because we like to eat. And
Absolutely.
almost all of our food producing plants, not the ones in the grass family that are mainly like commodity crops, like, all the wind pollinated rice, wheat, oats, corn, all those plants are pollinated by wind. But anything else, nuts, fruits, a lot of vegetables. You wouldn't have tomatoes if you didn't have bumblebees with their
Correct.
big bodies. They come along and they shake the plant and they move, and you need that bumblebee power to pollinate your tomatoes. So eating is another thing that we care about, but just caring about them because they're beautiful and interesting, and they're here and we're here, and there's an intrinsic value. We get to that level of just on the basis of being caring through native plant gardening and relationship with pollinators. And that's important for our species because we're so full of ourselves.
We really are. We really are. The lucky thing that we have here at Frisella, and if anybody comes out here, we sell our honey here and we have local honey. And our customer said to me, she goes, well, how local is your honey? And I said, follow me. And I pointed to the hives, and the hives we have right here on the property. And I know the beekeeper just took out about 500 pounds of honey. But for somebody like me who gets my frequent froggy throat in the allergy season, I try to take some of that honey in for the natural antihistamines that, the bees that are going to carry, and then produce the honey. I know that's one important thing. And I know a lot of people who are interested in local honey, we do have that here, which is an amazing thing, a byproduct of everything that we do.
Yes, we have a couple of honeybee hives at the Missouri Botanical Garden. Also, one of our horticulturists hived a swarm on the property a few years back, and we've kept those going. Now, this is another important thing to understand. There's so many opportunities to teach people about ecology in these conversations. Honeybees, Apis mellifera, are not native to North America.
No.
They were brought to North America by European settlers or colonists, or whatever term you want to use. Indigenous people here call them white man's flies. Oh, wow. And they are an unusual example of an introduced species that has not become an invader, that has not outcompeted our native bee populations, which there are a zillion kinds of them. And mostly they're solitary, they're not colony dwellers. When there is not very much forage available, or when there is not very much housing stock, if you will, for the solitary bees, the native bees, then there is a level of competition between the honeybees and the native bees. But you get to engage people with learning a little bit more about the natural world. Honeybees are one way, native bees are another way, and it all ties back to native plants.
I read something a little recently about cultivars of plants and of natives versus nativars.
Yes.
And can you explain a little bit the difference about cultivar, nativar?
Yes. Did you by any chance read that on the Wild Ones website?
No, my Better Homes and Gardens.
Oh, good. That's good. It's even better.
Yeah.
Mainstream. Yeah. So Wild Ones is a national organization of native plant advocates. We have the largest chapter in North America here in St. Louis, just topped over the 600 mark. Maybe it's 300. Anyway, we're big. Individuals and professionals. The straight native species are the species of plants that are unique to, that are, heafed is the word they use about breeds of sheep in England, that are heafed to a particular place. They are the plant peeps of that place. And in the plant breeding industry, as you know, there's always the lure of something new color, new foliage color,
Correct.
new shorter, taller, less leggy, blah, blah, blah. So when plant breeders do what they do well, which is change around the characteristics of plants to give you something new, that alters the very subtle chemistries that we really don't understand yet and we haven't dug into very much yet between insects and plants. So for example, a really good example is ninebark, the native bush
Correct.
ninebark,
Mhm.
Physocarpus something. The straight native is a woody with green leaves, pretty little lobed leaves, and little lacy apples of flowers, white flowers that bloom along the stalks. Ninebark Diablo, which is a registered trademark of Monrovia growers, was developed with purple foliage.
Correct.
And it's striking in the landscape. But what changes that chemistry? We don't know how or to what extent that affects the relationship of the pollinators that are related, that interact with ninebark to that cultivar. So wild ones, I cited them, they revisited that question just this year. They had originally posed and dug into some research about that question, I believe in 2015, and came out with a very strong statement saying, when you're landscaping with natives, anchor your landscape with a straight native species. Awesome. Don't go with the nativars, which is, plant speak for purple leaves versus regular green leaves.
Correct.
You can use those as accents in your landscape in the same way that I wouldn't advise anybody to rip out their hostas if they have hostas, but just choose more natives. So anchor your landscape with the natives and recognize that relationship. And I once asked Doug Talmy in a talk here, have plant breeders looked into breeding plants so that whatever the chemical factors are that have the pollinator relationship, spice bush, for example, another woody bush, it's the host plant for the spice bush swallowtail butterfly. What is it in the spice bush that is that magnet, that reproductive magnet and essential source for the butterfly? Could that be left in, bred in, emphasized, even if somebody wanted to have a purple leaf spice bush? That hasn't happened yet. Whether it can happen, whether it should happen, remains a question. But Wild Ones to me is a very credible source of national advocates and experts saying, in order to have ecological landscaping, reweave our rips in the web of life, grow the straight native species. And you can tell the difference when you look at the tag and it says VAR period, or it says SP, or it has an extra little name like ninebark Diablo.
Absolutely. All right. So if I'm going on the Missouri Botanical website, how can I learn more or how can I help?
Well, we have an excellent feature of our website called Plant Finder. You can go into our website and type into the search. I think you probably is best to go to the plants, about plants and gardening, type in the name, the common name or the scientific name of a plant, and get to a page about that plant that includes the voice of our former head of adult education, Glenn Kopp, saying the name, and some photos and some information about that plant. How big does it get? What is its range? Is it invasive? Is it native? Plant Finder, I don't know how many plants are in that database, but it's really, really big. Another incredible resource that Missouri Botanical Garden really appreciates is grownative.org. Grow Native are now regional, not just Missouri, native plant program. It was launched with PAC taxpayer dollars and grown to maturity by the Department of Conservation. And I think it was it was very recently. Conservation Department looked for a nonprofit to take it over. The Missouri Prairie Foundation is that nonprofit. So Grow Native is now a program of Missouri Prairie Foundation. There is an annual resource guide that tells you where to get the plants. It tells you who you can hire to do design and installation and maintenance. So it's a great resource for a partner in this like Frisella Nurseries. and has planting plans, and that is specific to native plants. Our plant finder is everything, anything and everything.
Absolutely.
So you have
It's
an
a great
individual
tool.
plant, and you can't just search native plants and you'll get a bunch of them. I don't think that we have our search refined that way.
Very good. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me. I love talking about this, and I could talk about it for hours. And if you do want to come out here to Frisella, I'm more than happy. Laura, our general manager, is more than happy. Anybody here at the garden center is more than happy to talk to you about the pollinators. We have done, Jean, I'll have to tell you, I did do some field trips for some young ones, and they were not afraid of the bees. So the bees, and I go, guys, they don't want you. They want the pollen. Don't worry.
Right.
So it was super fun.
The last line of defense for a bee is stinging you. If it stings you, it will die.
Exactly.
It's not going to sting you for recreation. Wasps, you got to watch out for, but not bees. Can I ask you, how is native plant landscaping, ecological landscaping, how is that doing for Frisella Nursery as a business line?
Very, very good. More and more of our landscaping customers, our retail customers, definitely just want to plant pollinator gardens that have natives only. And a lot of them are sticking with the straight cultivar or straight native plant, as opposed to a cultivar or a nativar of that native plant. So we sell so many of them, and it's so great that people are doing this. And it's not just a once a week thing, Jean. It is every day somebody wants a new pollinating plant. And what can I do? What can I do to help the bees? Butterfly bush is crazy, and it's so fun because it's a show here for us as well as in our business to see all nature just around us. And it's pretty good, but it really has helped our business quite a bit. And, we're more than happy to talk about how to establish your garden. Even I'm getting a lot of people who are living in villas that can't really have a garden, talking to them about their raised flower beds, raised pollinator beds, not even vegetables, just plants to pollinate.
Yeah, good. And doing that in containers. Can I ask you, is part of what you're doing, part of what you're seeing in your design and installation and maintenance requests having to do with rainscaping, with using native plants to manage stormwater?
Yes.
That's another thing we do with natives at the Missouri Botanical Garden.
Absolutely. Yes, we are getting more and more requests of that to help save water and to help with the planting of those plants that will help conserve the water, help with water runoff, things like that will thrive and live in their landscaping. Yeah.
I like to see natives, some of the natives that work in rain gardens, especially in the parts of, they can go from drought to flood conditions and not.
It's amazing.
Who do we know that does that? But along riverbanks and riparian corridors, that's those plants. So
exactly,
let's bring them into our environment.
And we bring them in, and people are just flocking more and more to that every month, every day, every week, flocking more and more to that's what they want in their gardens. So you kind of see our business model shift a little bit into that. Besides the formal manicure gardens, they're adding pollinator gardens along with those in the same landscape. So it's a pretty neat thing that people are recognizing that this is mostly important.
Yeah. And we're seeing native plant gardens in high profile places. So it's changing the aesthetic from the stupid, boring, sterile green carpet to something that is more biodiverse. The prairie on the grounds of Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, City Garden in downtown St. Louis. That's very formal, very limited plant palette.
Absolutely.
Natives. And then places like, our Whitmire Wildflower Garden and the surrounding prairies and woodlands and wetlands at Shaw Nature Reserve. It's really fun to be able to tell people where to go to see those things.
Absolutely is.
You can work with your local nurseries, your local garden centers, and keep that income, that business in our local community. It's all a real ecological win-win-win.
I love it. Well, Jean, thank you again very much for a very wonderful afternoon and talking with me about this, because I could, again, talk about it all day long. And it's the best subject we could talk about right now.
Great. We have a green resources information service at the
Okay.
Missouri Botanical Garden. I am the green resources
Green
manager.
Jean. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm answer girl for that those questions by email and by phone. Green resources at mobot, mobot.org, green resources at mobot.org, or 314-577-0246. We will answer your questions about sustainable living at any time. And if they are plant questions, specifically, if they're native plant questions, okay, got that covered. But if they are different kinds of plant questions, I would refer those to our plant information service.
Mhm.
We have a massive knowledge base on our staff. And if the question exceeds our knowledge base, I will look that up and research it for you, or work with my
Awesome.
colleagues, so that adds to our knowledge base.
Yeah,
Green-
there's so much on your website as far as recycling, just being green, and green is here to stay. We're going to stay green forever. So
Nature did not make a mistake by having the leaves not be pink.
exactly. Love it. I love it. All right, guys, follow us again. We'll see you next week at Frisella All Around the Yard. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media networks, and at frisellanursery.com, frisellalandscapegroup.com, and our YouTube channel, and click now to subscribe. So I appreciate it. Thanks for talking to me. Have a great day. See you next week, everybody. Thank you.